Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. It's great to see everyone's faces. Let's see. Everyone. Okay, we're still waiting for a few people to join, so bear with us for a second. Hi, Adam. Does everyone have their coffee or tea or whatever else you have at 10 o'clock? Let's see. Okay, we'll get started here in just a minute. Just waiting for a few more people. While we're waiting for a few more people, I just wanted to say good morning. Happy Cinco de Mayo. And my name is Christy Pierce Percy. I am CREW Silicon Valley's president this year. Thank you so much for joining us for our coffee conversation this morning. We are so excited. This is so relevant right now for what we need to hear. If I could ask if you all could hit your mute button, just so that when our presenters do speak, that they're able to use some of their sharing tools, and would appreciate it. And also, we have a chat. If you scroll your mouse around on the bottom screen, there's a chat icon. If you click that, the whole purpose of our chat really is to be, to use this for a conversation and really casual. So I'd love for you all to utilize that chat box. Ask any questions you have. Say hello, whatever you'd like to use it for. But our presenters today, they're amazing. They're full of information. So please utilize the chat, and please mute yourselves would be amazing. Thank you. And every week during our shelter in place, we're wanting to have a member touch base with you, either a coffee conversation. And next week is actually something a little different. We're going to be doing a trivia night. So stay tuned on that. There'll be more information. It'll be really fun. But before we get started, I just wanted to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors, we love you guys so much. You just, especially during a time like this, we so appreciate you. Our platinum sponsors, BBSI, Impec Group, One Workplace, Washington Holdings, and our gold sponsors, we have American Asphalt, Arborwell, Columbia Property Trust, Hayworth, HGA, Iron Construction, Paul and McKay, and Perfection Services. And our media sponsors, Silicon Valley Business Journal and the Registry. So thank you all. And I would like to turn over the mic to Tristan. Tristan is, she works on the programs committee for CREW Silicon Valley, and I'll let her talk about herself and say hello and introduce herself. But Tristan, would you like to say hello?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this week's coffee chat on the topic of boosting your well-being during quarantine. My name is Kristen Serpa, and I'll be your moderator today, as Christy mentioned. I am a grateful member of CREW Silicon Valley and on the programs committee. Right now, I'm with CBRE, a well-known and respected company within the industry. I'm a facilities manager with CBRE on site at Juniper Networks in Sunnyvale, California. I'm excited to be with you all today and looking forward to what our guests have to share today. So joining us today, we have Dr. Shashank Joshi and Grace Gengoux. So Dr. Shashank Joshi is a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences by courtesy of pediatrics at the Stanford University Medical Center of Education. He comes to us with a great wealth of knowledge and experience, and we're very happy to have you today. We also have Grace Gengoux, a clinical associate professor, director of the Autism Intervention Clinic, and well-being director within Stanford University's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. So awesome bio and backgrounds. Welcome you both, and we're so excited to have you. I'll let you kind of dive into, sharing kind of an intro on you and a couple of your slides, and then we'll dive into a couple of questions.
Great, thank you so much. So Dr. Gengoux is just bringing some slides up there, and I just really, really delighted, along with Dr. Gengoux, to be with you all this morning. We're gonna give some opening thoughts and reflections based on our work, not only within the Department of Psychiatry here and in the community, but also as parents ourselves and professionals, and trying to achieve that sense of balance for any time, but in particular during these very interesting times of COVID-19. So a couple of things I just want to highlight. One of our goals today is to make sure you know what resources are out there. So Dr. Gengoux is going to present some slides, and I'll chime in a little bit, but I think the things that she'll be presenting here are going to be really useful. And then we're going to have a resource sheet in addition for you to be able to get the slides that you see here for yourselves. And I know this is being recorded. So I think the three most important things I want to highlight: this is temporary, and it's permanent. So it's temporary in the sense that we have this set of restrictions which are feeling really unique and maybe provide some opportunity, but mostly are stressful. And for all of you in the world of real estate, you've had to think a lot about how this might change your practice for the future. And probably for others of you, it'll change it in some ways and not in others. I think one of the most important things we can all do around taking care of ourselves is really tuning into how do we know when we're doing well, and how do we know when we're feeling stressed? Because I'm guessing that for a lot of you, and I know for me and for my family, the stress for me looks a little bit different. It's not exactly the same kind of stress that I've felt before. It's not so obvious. It's coming out in different kinds of ways. So like I've had changes in my sleep pattern, and I'm a really good sleeper. And I think I do have a lot of things on my mind. My wife and I are raising 3 boys. They're all going through different things, but now some of those everyday things I could bounce back from are now starting to have more of an impact. So I'm having to make sure to really pay attention to my sleep schedule, really pay attention to how I'm getting out and moving. So you might notice my background. I'm actually in my office at the Department of Psychiatry. There's like 3 people in this building that normally houses over 200 people. So it's super quiet. I ride my bike here. It's like 10 miles total each way, which is not a marathon, but it does get my blood pumping. And I have found that to be really useful, not only to not have to share the Wi-Fi at home and having 5 people on Zoom doing different things, but also to just have the quiet place that for me is part of cultivating my well-being. So the first step for stress busting, and we're going to be highlighting some of the resources. One of them that I'm talking from now is the Surgeon General of California's stress busting strategies. And so this comes right from the website. If you forget this or you can't find it, just go Surgeon General's Playbook, California, and it's the first thing that comes up. And so we'll get into the details a little bit when Dr. Gengoux talks, but for me, it's like, okay, how am I checking in and recognizing how the stress shows up for me? And I just mentioned, for me, it's the sleep and the need to move. Step 2 is making a plan for myself and making sure that like I'm paying attention to these 6 strategies. and that I want to think about what I usually do in stress, and then I want to make sure I make a list for myself. And so on the Surgeon General site here, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris has highlighted the 6 areas that she really focuses on. And again, she's a pediatrician, and I'm very proud to say we trained her when she was a resident here. We knew when she was a resident she was going to be a superstar. We didn't know that she'd be somebody sending out a playbook through Governor Newsom's office as California's first Surgeon General. So you can rest assured that all of the things she's recommended here are science-based. And then you have to find a plan that works for you. And so one of the things here that I talked about for myself, quality sleep, and then the other one is physical activity. Whatever it is for you, come up with a plan that works for you. And then you've got to work the program that works for you. You got to check in with yourself in the morning. Another little small thing that I learned when I was going to a workshop as a parent is, you know, one of the first things we do in the morning is what? What's the first thing you do when you open your eyes? Well, for many of us, it's getting up and stretching, and for others, we grab our phones, right? A little hit of dopamine to look at your phone, and what you might put it down, or you might look at the email. Maybe you got some news flashes. Let me invite you to do anything but pick up your phone as the very first thing, unless you need to look at the time. But you know, when you open that screen, there's probably some notifications. Is that really the way you want to start your day? You're going to have the entire 8 to 10 to 12 hours to look at all those notifications. Maybe you want to start your day in some other way and really resist getting that first hit of dopamine by looking at your phone. Maybe you want to get that first cup of coffee or cup of tea first. Or maybe you want to do your yoga stretching or walk around the house or greet your spouse or something. Anyway, so it's a small little thing that can mean a lot. And so Dr. Gengoux and I are going to cover some of these really everyday strategies. And then I'm going to turn it over to her now, because as the director of well-being in our department and one of the directors here in the child division, she's not only done a number of presentations, she's also learned a lot from what are on people's minds. And one other website we want to highlight is from the Berkeley Greater Good Science Center. You see it there on your screen. And this is one of my favorite stickies that I'm passing out to people, that the daily quarantine questions, the 6 questions to ask yourself in quarantine. And this was actually created by a Bay Area journalist, Brooke Anderson. And this is on the Greater Good site. So we teach a class to undergrads. And I just love these. They're very simple, but they also fall in line with Dr. Burke-Harris's recommendations. The first one is, what am I grateful for today? And this actually came from some lessons that were learned not only by people who have been doing well and have had a lot to be sort of obviously grateful for to others, but this actually came from someone in prison who was actually in solitary confinement, Oscar Lopez Rivera, and he was speaking at UC Berkeley. He was 36 years in prison, 12 of those in solitary confinement. And he talked about what he did every day in the morning just to stay alive. And it turned into this, he sang a certain song, and it was Violeta Parra's song, Gracias a la Vida, which is thank you to life. And he was talking about how his incarcerated family had so much to teach him about how to extend physical and social isolation and survive. And then how to cultivate a daily gratitude practice, even in the most cruel of conditions. I'm guessing most of you on the call don't live in anywhere near these kinds of conditions, and yet you're facing some of the hardest things you've faced. So let's pay attention to some of the good things that are still happening. Number 2, who am I checking in on or checking with today? It may be a parent, it may be an aunt, it may be a neighbor. Number 3, what expectations of normal am I letting go of today? How am I going to give myself a break so that I don't, always have to have the news on? And I might be facing a different job situation soon. So what am I going to just, it's okay if the kids don't learn anything today. We still love them. They're still going to get to bed eventually. We've got to let the schedule that as we know it go. Number 4, we talked about this. How am I getting outside? Number 5, how am I moving my body? If you have to be in front of a screen, do office yoga. Every 40 or 50 minutes, get up, walk around the office, do some stretching. And finally, and I think most importantly, what beauty am I either creating, cultivating, noticing, or inviting in today? And so speaking of beauty and beautiful work and amazing work that has a lot of implications for well-being, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend, Dr. Gengoux, to take us from here.
Thanks, Shashank. It's great to be with you all today, and thank you for kicking it off so nicely. I'm gonna I'll introduce myself and talk about a few of the things that I've been really relying on myself. I'm also a parent of 2 young kids, and finding a lot of challenges adjusting to this lifestyle, like many of you have mentioned already in the chat. Speaking of children, I'll highlight, and we'll send this around afterwards, a few of the key resources for children and teens that have been put together, one by the National Center for School Mental Health. There's a great teen guide to mental health and wellness. There's some resources for implications for LGBTQ youth, and a great toolkit by the Herd Alliance, which Dr. Joshi is a part of. And then I also put a link here. Stanford's Center for Continuing Medical Education has put together a series of webinars. Some of these are really targeted towards medical professionals, but some of them are things that might be of interest to some of you, like positive parenting during shelter in place, how to talk to young people about COVID-19, and one specific about sleep. So hopefully that's useful to you. What I would some general comments to kind of frame our conversation. I saw on Twitter the other day, maybe some of you guys saw this same image that said, we're not all in the same boat, but we're in the same storm. And I want to acknowledge we really aren't all in the same boat. Some people have been, have experienced the very severe, very stressful implications of this condition, whether it's because of, worries about the health of a family member or losing a loved one, or the serious financial challenges of, losing your employment or your livelihood or something like that. And so there is not going to be one solution that's going to fit everybody. I'll throw out a few ideas, but you also have to know yourself and know what has worked for you in the past. You probably have to double down or triple down on some of those strategies because this is an especially complex time. But I like to think about the well-being or taking care of ourself strategies in a time like this as actually, this can be your competitive edge. This is such a challenging time for everyone, but the secret of success, honestly, is to keep yourself physically and mentally and emotionally, in as good shape as you can so that you can meet these really serious challenges. Speaking of phones and checking your phone in the morning, right? Oops. Give me a sec. This is an image that I like to think about when I'm thinking about myself. There are activities that we do that regularly drain our batteries down to 0. And we have to be thoughtful about what can we possibly do to recharge back up. How are you going to plug yourself in and get from 1% back up to 80% so you can make it through the day? And, for each of us, those strategies are going to be different, but all of us have to do some things to recharge. And so I would urge you, as we're talking today, to think a little bit about what might it take to sort of plug back in, because the regular draining of the battery, it can't be sustained forever. Shashank mentioned a couple of things that we know from the literature, from the research, that are especially powerful. You wouldn't believe if you read about the science that's been done on this very simple practice of gratitude. It sounds kind of hokey to try to be grateful in a time when things are so challenging, But the truth is that our minds are kind of evolutionarily built to focus on the negative. And so that's already a problem when things are good. We focus a lot on the negative. But when things are really bad, it's a bigger problem because we basically forget even the very small things that are helpful. One of the ways people practice gratitude that I like a lot is this practice called 3 good things. And you can do this with your kids or your team at work or at home. And the idea is you just name 3 good things, anything you can think of. It can be something you did, it can be something somebody else did, it can be just like the beautiful spring flowers, the sunshine, anything at all. And in studies of healthcare workers, they've found that doing this practice, just a couple of, I mean, it's less than a minute probably takes most of us to do it, improves happiness, work-life balance, reduces burnout, reduces depression, not just immediately, but 1 and even 12 months after the intervention. There is not much that you could do that's going to take you less than 5 minutes for 2 weeks that would help you, long term. So this is really useful. And there's another kind of concept. You're probably familiar with the idea of a growth mindset, thinking about your abilities or the abilities of someone else as things that can be developed and cultivated, not that you're just sort of born with a certain level of ability, but that it's possible to grow and change and develop over time. And that idea, prioritizing your own well-being and having a growth mindset, also seems to combat burnout, which we're all at more risk for burnout than ever these days.
Can I say one thing about that?
Great.
Grace, before you go to self-evaluation. The important thing about the gratitude, about the 3 good things that really makes it pop and come alive is you write down the 3 good things, and it's often done before we go to bed. Write down the 3 good things that happened and write down why you think they happened. So the why part, as a behaviorist, I think Dr. Gengoux knows this, but for all of us, it's one thing to notice and feel really good that my wife was in clinic today's Tuesday. So on Friday, she was in clinic. She came home and she brought mango ice cream for me randomly to surprise me. And it was the longest, hardest day on Friday. And it was like such a great surprise. And it was exactly the thing I wanted. That was one of the things that I wrote down. But then why? Why would she bring mango ice cream for me just randomly? Well, because she loves me. So that's a very simple example. This morning on the way here, 2 of my boys were up. My teenager, of course, was still sleeping when I left the house before 8 o'clock. And they both came up to hug me and they wanted to tell me to have a nice day. Well, that was beautiful, right? Why was that beautiful? Why did they come and do that? Well, because we've been really busy. We actually had a really difficult night last night, but we're starting a new day and we're connected. And so we care about each other, right? So that's the why. So the important part about the 3 good things is to identify what's underneath. If it's a thing of beauty you notice, some gardener, some essential worker, someone is taking care of that garden to make sure that it looks nice. And you smelled the rose on your walk or on the bike ride. So just a little thing there, that the robust part of that outcome in the 12 months later is for those who did it every day for at least 2 weeks, really had a profound effect 6 months and 12 months later. And part of the exercise is to write the 3 good things down, take 10 minutes before you go to bed. Ideally, write it down in a journal because then you can go back and see it and write down why you think it happened. What was the reason that happened? Why did it go well? Back to you, Grace.
I love that. And what it reminds me of is that, of all of the things that we know about that predict happiness long term, connection with other people is really, that's the secret sauce. And so that's part of what makes this time so challenging for all of us, is that our ability to connect with other people, whether it's, because of the way that the work we love has been disrupted, or because of the people we love who are far away and we can't connect with, that's one of the painful parts of this period. And so the nice thing about that gratitude practice, as you can kind of hear as Dr. Joshi is talking about his personal examples, is you will see that when you start to write down, you know, why this happened, it really kind of brings into relief the things that you've been doing and the things that the people around you have been doing to sort of stay connected. And that is a really powerful act. I want to say for a minute, something about how our minds work in a crisis, because one of the challenges, you know, your mind is really one of your most important tools. And so the better you can kind of learn to work with what you've got mentally, the better you'll be able to cope. And some of these techniques come from the field of cognitive behavioral therapy, but they work for people not even in therapy, just all of us. And the truth is that, you know, we might beat ourselves up about not being very kind to other people, but often we are the hardest on ourselves. And so whether we're thinking about other people or we're thinking about ourselves, one really helpful tip is to remember that all feelings are okay. It's okay to have negative feelings, and just because you feel angry or you feel you know, frustrated or disappointed or anxious, it doesn't mean that feeling defines you. You just have the feeling, and it is temporary. And our negative thoughts are actually they're trying their best to protect us. You know, the things that we fear, they're trying to help us take care of ourselves. Sometimes they get out of control, and that's where we end up being kind of a victim of our own feelings, but they are actually trying to protect us. And, you know, if we make a mistake, remembering that mistakes don't define us. And also if we feel guilty for something, like even feeling guilty for some way that another person feels, it can sometimes be helpful to remember you're not actually that powerful. Like, you can't actually make other people feel exactly the way you want them to. That isn't the way that human interactions work. So you can take a little bit of the pressure off yourself and kind of let go of that. And part of the reason, the sort of neuroscience behind why talking about our feelings and naming them works, is that it helps the front part of the brain kind of calm down the emotional part of the brain, the amygdala. And so the feelings actually get less intense and more manageable if we can talk about them and name them. So what I want to end with here is this idea that we've used in a couple of different contexts of kind of like a recipe. You know, maybe you have like a favorite family recipe. Think of this as a sort of a favorite family recipe that, like, you probably through your prior experience and even some experimentation that you might need to do now, can come up with a sort of a secret sauce or a sort of a special recipe for yourself. What are your absolute essential ingredients? And I mean, it's funny right now, right? We're all going to the grocery store as little as humanly possible. And so you probably have a pretty good list in your mind of like, what are the things I can't possibly live without? Like, what's the thing that once I run out of that, it means that it's time to go to the grocery store again, right? You can think of your own kind of resilience strategies like this. Like, maybe it's going to be those things on the Surgeon General's list, like, you know, sleep or exercise. Maybe it is going to be something like gratitude. Maybe it is going to be some kind of connection with somebody that you love. Maybe it's going to be a meditation practice or a religious activity or something. But it's going to have to be a short list, because most of us are as strapped for time as we ever have been, juggling, you know, the distance learning of our children and the crisis in our work and all of that. But this recipes idea can be very useful. So I'll end there, and then I know there are a number of questions that have come up. We can start to respond to those.
So yeah, go ahead, Chrissy.
Yeah, there is a question that came up earlier, and I just wanted to go back to it really quick. It says, the stress of organizing my own schedule and helping my kids stay on top of their school schedule is making me so stressed out. I've tried everything. I'm open to suggestions on how to keep this all organized when there seems to be zero help from school's work with dealing with teens.
So I have some thoughts there because we have 2 teens and a preteen. I think the first thing is to really ask yourself, how much of this would you be willing to let go of? So I'll just give you an example. In our school system, it's mostly asynchronous learning. We're in Palo Alto Unified. So they have optional Zoom sessions, which occur regularly, which I know the kids who join really enjoy. My kids really don't want to do that. They are really focused on their work. They get up probably an hour and a half, 2 hours later than they would have during the school time. So instead of waking up at 7, they're waking up at 9. They're actually getting their 9 to 11 hours of sleep a night, which is great. I expect to see a lot of growth physically in my kids over the next couple of months too. We've just had to let it go. We've had to just say, all right, you know what? One of the reasons I'm here in the office is that when I'm not at home, they do way better managing their own schedule. But we do have some expectations that we check in on at the end of the day. And then every week we can actually ask the teachers for some progress. So for us, it was about, we had to schedule ourselves so that we would be able to say, all right, how much, let's get some well-being for us and get that part sorted. And now let's see, how much micromanaging do we really need to do? Do we need to be the manager? Or do we need to be the consultant? If any of you have read Michael Riera's work from Berkeley, he's a psychologist, he talks about that. Like when we go from parenting children to parenting teenagers, we move from being a manager to being a consultant. And so while they're in times of asynchronous learning, I think we might have to be more of a consultant, and we can ask the teachers to weigh in if they're falling behind, or in one of my kids' cases, I think he probably is going to have to join some of those optional Zoom sessions so he can connect with other kids and also feel a little bit of, you know, urgency and responsibility to that teacher's face rather than just seeing what the assignments are online. So that's how we dealt with it. Grace, do you have any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, this is such an important question, and it's, you know, it's so common. So many of us are experiencing this situation, and you know, in reality, there's no way we can possibly keep the same level of work productivity and the same level of school engagement when there's no child care and there's no, you know, there's very minimal help from anyone outside of the household. So remembering that this is temporary, as it continues to spread on longer and longer and longer, it doesn't feel as temporary anymore, but it is going to get better. And then picking, you know, this is another good place to pick your sort of essential ingredients. Like there might be something in your kids' lessons or work, you know, school work that's absolutely non-negotiable and essential, but it's going to have to be less than it was before. And same thing in your work, probably. There's some things that are absolutely essential and necessary, but it's probably going to have to be less than before. And so if we can recognize that and just be okay with, you know, like if my kid doesn't learn as fast, or even if my work isn't as straightforward in a global pandemic, I mean, that's reasonable. It's okay.
Okay, great. So I'm going to get started with some questions that we've already predetermined, just thinking, you know, a wider perspective of what everybody might want to know. And then everybody on the line, feel free to, again, type any questions you may have, and we'll sub them in here and there. Okay, so my first question for you is, what are you seeing in your practice right now in terms of people presenting different needs.
Grace, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I'll jump in with this one. There's all sorts. You can imagine there's a ton of different things going on. You heard mention that I'm the director of the autism clinic, and so in that part of my job, I work with a lot of parents of kids who have special needs, and this is, probably no surprise to you that for all the children, typically developing children who are struggling to do their distance learning and the parents who are struggling to supervise that distance learning, for kids with special needs, the challenges are even more serious. And this is a big problem. We don't have great solutions. Every family is trying to sort of figure it out on their own, but it's very stressful to have kids with special needs who are having trouble getting the services that they need.
Yeah, and I would say, so much of what we're doing right now as child mental health practitioners is supporting parents. So much of what I do as a school mental health practitioner is supporting teachers and building capacity. So what I'm seeing in clinic and what I'm seeing over at the hospital, at Mills Hospital, where I work some weekends of the month, is the teenagers and the middle schoolers are coming in hospitalized because their usual methods of connection and cultivating well-being, which is essentially their friends and their peers and interacting with their peers, are no longer available in the same way. Additionally, if there is stress at home, if there is conflict, if there is an abuse situation, all of those things can be exacerbated. So we're seeing both for people who normally are doing okay, who we may have seen, and they're now, we're seeing them less frequently in the clinic. For youth, a major method of connection is their friends. And for those for whom that's true, that's been a big stressor for them, and the loss of that. And then the sort of not knowing what's going to happen next. So I think if we knew that, okay, on June 1st, we're going to be opening up and allowing for, gatherings of no more than 10 with masks, staying 6 feet apart, even that might give us some semblance of, okay, we know then we're going to be able to do some of this. But I think so much of this for our youth have to do with, and for the parents, has to do with the uncertainty. You all know in California, we're really the model for the rest of the country. We sheltered 2 to 3 weeks earlier than everyone else, and we're also going to be sheltering and opening up more gradually 2 to 3 weeks later. And I think in the long term, that's the right strategy. You're all in real estate. It's all about timing in addition to location. Timing is everything. And I think helping our young people cultivate patience and cultivate some things that they can do in the short term, and also, joining with them and saying, yeah, it's hard. I wish I could tell you when this is going to get back to a little more normal. I started my comments by saying this is temporary, and in some ways it's permanent. It's permanent in the sense that after this is over, this first phase, we'll all have this burned in our memory about what was hard and what we were able to do and what we learned from. So if there is a second peak in the fall or next spring or next fall, we'll have a better idea of what to do. And this is going to be a new normal because we're going to have to adjust for this. And so part of it with our clinic population is not only helping them with what might be really a struggle right now, but also helping them to cultivate some of their gratitude for some of the things that are going well. For example, some of the kids who have social anxiety and school phobia, well, they're just having the time of their lives right now because the main stressor for them, which is going to school, has just been removed. Dr. Gengoux, who's a board certified behavior analyst, has a term for this: negative reinforcement, right? The stress of having to go to school and deal with just everything, the interpersonal relationships, the teachers, the in-person interactions, that's just been lifted, it's just been removed. But for the majority of others, it's difficult. And so we're seeing that in the clinic, and we're trying to not only focus on the how to deal with the stress, but also how to really notice in some of these daily quarantine questions, even for youth, there are some things you could be grateful for. Let's try to pay attention to those as well.
Those are all very good points. Thanks for sharing. So my next question is, from a mental health perspective, how is this disaster different from other major crises we face as a nation? Examples are wars, natural disasters, etc.
You know, one of the things I've been reflecting on, there's a lot that could be said on this question, but one of the things I've been reflecting on is, you know, the uniqueness of doing this in a time where we have the technology that we have and where the infrastructure is not broken. And there are some big benefits and some big downsides of that. So the benefit, of course, is that we can connect with each other. We can continue our work. Our kids can continue to learn. We can do, you know, some real estate transactions. We can have a happy hour with people across the world. But it also, it makes it even harder to forgive ourselves for the ways in which this has changed our lives. Because, you know, I know, like for myself, if this had happened 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, or if the internet was broken, you know, my sheltering in place would be a lot more relaxing. But because I'm working full time and I'm parenting two kids who are on, you know, they have their own school expectations, and my husband is working full time and his job is busier and more serious than ever. We, you know, our expectations for ourselves are very, very high. And that, I think, makes it very different than a different kind of a disaster where we just wouldn't be working, or we wouldn't be trying to get our kids to go to school. We would just be taking care of ourselves in a much more reduced set of expectations.
And this gets back to in the 6 daily quarantine questions to ask yourself from the Greater Good Science Center. Number 3 is, what expectations of normal am I letting go of today? So I think that is what's different. When it first hit, I remember part of the gratitude practice for me and for my kids was just talking about 2 or 3 realities, which were very apparent to me as a physician who trained in New York, which is, and living in San Francisco Bay Area, right? We did not have an earthquake. We have running water. Our grocery stores are open. And we've got Wi-Fi. We've got internet that mostly works hopefully no one's Zoom bombing many of your calls. And we're not in New York, and we have a lot of family in New York, and I have a lot of colleagues in New York who are on the front line whose hospitals have all been turned into COVID hospitals, and we have psychiatrists who've been you know, channeled to do some of the frontline work in the emergency rooms around triaging some of the patients coming in. So yeah, our lives have been changed, and yet it could be so much worse. So I think the question asked about compared to other major disasters, we've really never had anything like this that's affected each and every one of the 50 states in some kind of a way. And so I do think the idea that we're not all in the same boat, but we are in the same ocean is so true. And so I think it's different. It's similar to other disasters, but it's different in a lot of other ways for us in Northern California.
And back to your point, we should be grateful that we still have running water and food, and most of us, and electricity, and, you know, an ability to connect, even if it's through Zoom or Teams or whatnot. Okay, so how are mental health needs and issues different for different types of people, including young people, women, men, parents, young kids, single people? I think we kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but if you can touch base on this again, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would, this is a really important question. And I think, you know, we could think about categories of people who might be particularly vulnerable, but it's also useful to remember the wide diversity that also exists within those categories. And so, you know, we're all aware, hopefully in the news, you know, of the disparities that are exacerbated by a crisis like this, and remembering people who have, you know, are less fortunate than ourselves is an important aspect of staying informed and practicing empathy and altruism. Actually, you know, I didn't say before, but one of the things that's been really striking to us in our clinical work is to see our colleagues step forward with wishes to help, and you know, and to see the huge outpouring of support for healthcare workers and desire to try to immediately put up resources for the mental health of healthcare workers. So it's certainly true that, you know, depending on a person's profession or where they live, they might have a different amount of actual exposure to the virus, and that can really have different implications. But in your question, the other thing that struck me is people's living situations. This is another thing we're seeing, you know, and I'm sure, you know, being in the real estate field, you have a special kind of sense of this yourselves. But people who are living alone are experiencing this crisis very differently than people who are living in crowded households with not enough space. And so it's you know, it's a blessing and a curse probably to be with you know, crowded in with lots of family members. And that's one thing I've been thinking about a lot. So this is another place where knowing yourself and being kind of aware and accepting of your own personal circumstances can be very useful. If you do live alone, of course, you'll have to have some kinds of solutions for having human connection and interaction. We've seen that in our work. And like, for instance, many of the trainees that we have working with us live alone, and are also in you know, probably living in this Bay Area, you know, for 1 year where they don't know a lot of people or have a lot of connections outside of work, and that's a real challenge. So we've been trying to come up with solutions for those individuals.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than what Dr. Gengoux just said. I strongly believe in that. That I want to emphasize that last part in particular, because both Grace and I work with a lot of trainees, and it's interesting now because we can't really get together with people face to face. We're getting together with everyone virtually. So why not reconnect with some people you've been meaning to reconnect with? This is a great opportunity to do that. And then that maybe builds forward after we're able to spend a little more time in person. We've reconnected with some people that we might not have thought of. We have a very close sort of extended family member, chosen family. It's a woman in San Francisco, lives by herself in the inner Sunset. She's 83. She is still very active, but she doesn't have an iPhone. She has an old school phone, and then she has one of these flip phones. So we can't see her, but we call her on the phone regularly because that's what she knows and that's what she's used to. And she in turn reaches out to others. But I think making sure we pay attention to the ways we can communicate, and even with those with whom we're very close, or those we want to reconnect with, we have the opportunity now while we're still sheltering, and whether that's by FaceTime or Zoom or just picking up the phone and calling, that can be a great way to check on people, especially those for whom we're concerned might not have a lot of other folks to connect with. Just picking up the phone and calling them. And I mean, you see, I've been noticing, like on my phone, I'm making phone calls to people to just check on them. It's usually 10 minutes and maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops. I feel like, oh, I'm so busy and I'm doing it. But if I'm in traffic, you know, and there's not a lot of traffic right now. I don't have to deal with traffic. So I can make a quick 10-minute call and check up on 3 80-plus-year-olds in my life per day. And it gives me a great feeling that I'm doing that as part of the quarantine daily practice, but also I feel great because I'm reconnecting with people I care about. And it's not a big time investment, but it really has a lot of well-being dividend.
Well, great suggestions. I totally agree. Here's another question I'm going to plug in, just a private or anonymous question. Someone had mentioned, sometimes I really feel with guilt because I'm well employed and safe at my house. Is this normal to feel this way? I don't like the way it makes me feel. So I've heard a little bit about this before where, you know, people maybe are having trouble speaking that, you know, maybe they are in fear or, you know, as well, but they feel bad because they still have, you know, their jobs. They haven't been furloughed. You know, they're not in the same type of hardships that others are in. So they, you know, have a hard time speaking up. So what are your thoughts on that and how we offer some suggestions to them?
This is a hard one and really common, but it's useful to remember that you know, what's good for other people is our own health and happiness is actually very good for the people around us. And so it's okay to take care of yourself, and it's okay to feel good about the, you know, blessings that you have in your life, and to use that as like a strong place to, you know, to come from, to help other people. So, you know, like what Dr. Joshi is mentioning, you know, if you're someone with privilege and you might be able to spare 15 minutes to call someone that you love and brighten up their day, you know, you can use the fact that you, you know, that you are financially secure, or that you, you know, you don't have to have a commute anymore, so you've got that extra time, or, you know, maybe you don't have children at home and so you're not doing the distance learning thing or whatever. You know, I think this is a challenge that we face even outside of the crisis, is feeling both of these extremes, like that that we have so many good things in our life, and also that things are hard. And this crisis brings it into even more stark relief. But this is the human experience, that there's always going to be some things to be grateful for, and there's always going to be some challenges, no matter how, you know, easy it looks to others, like you have it, you will still have your own challenges too. So I would kind of embrace the good things that are going on in your life, and think of that as good justification for using your energy and your time for good, for helping other people.
Yeah, nothing much to add there, other than saying people are getting very creative. I'm seeing in the chat, people are setting up their cornhole games, and like the neighbors come by and watch, and it's kind of fun. I'm meeting neighbors I haven't met for a long time, I haven't seen in a long time, stopping and saying bye, like intentionally saying hello while I have my mask, and our eyes meet each other, and our eyes are smiling. I'm smiling at neighbors I haven't really seen very much, but it's nice to see them. And just there's a lot, including for any of you who are fans of the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and any of the late night shows, you know, they're all broadcasting from their homes. They're doing some of the most creative content I've ever seen. I'm a theater kid, and I've been on stage my whole life, so I really pay attention to how people use this time to get creative. And so the guy who runs the band for Jimmy Fallon stuff is great, by the way. He's broadcasting from his basement. His two daughters are there. It's hilarious, like, because he's doing everyday parenting things too, and having a lot of trouble sometimes. But Questlove, who is Amir Thompson is his name, but Questlove is the guy with the big afro and the comb, and runs the band for Jimmy Fallon. He's a DJ. He's the leader of the Roots, the band The Roots. Every night, if you go to Questlove's Instagram page, if you just look up Questlove, he does a fundraiser every single night. He's been raising money for the last 6 weeks, and he just does a free DJ set, and you can just have it on. And they're also streaming on YouTube and on Twitch and on Periscope. But anyway, you see all the people's comments. It's really easy to donate. You can give $10, you can give $100, whatever, but it's like Feed the Kids NYC, and it just goes in right away. And it's like, what a great cause. And you can listen to great music. And then you see Questlove, who it feels like he's right there because he's on your screen. It's one of those things where you can just add comments and see it go into the comment list, and he occasionally will like talk right back at you. So those are some kind of fun ideas. When you've got it good, there are things you can do. And I think what Grace said, you know, making a couple of calls are not only going to help that person, can really help you. And then there's some ways that if you can donate some money or some blood, as is being highlighted here on the Zoom, on the group chat. Donating blood is a really big thing right now as well.
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple more questions. I'm gonna ask just one of the two since we have 2 more minutes left, but For economic insecurity, so job loss or potential job loss is also a big deal on top of social isolation. What to do about feelings on financial hopelessness? What are your advice? What's your advice on that? For everyone, for anyone who's feeling hopeless right now.
You know, remembering how you got where you are can be very useful. You know, the time horizon right now seems so intense and short, but you know, probably if you look back on your life, there have been other times of challenge. And this is going to be a time where, you know, it may take a lot of creativity. It may not actually turn out the way that you expect. But for most of us, you know, we're going to get through this and we're going to figure it out, and times are going to be better again soon. And just remembering the longer term and the fact that hard work and creativity and being willing to chase opportunities, even if they're unexpected, that come up, is really what's going to work. You probably wouldn't want to be, you know, profiting, speaking of guilt, right? Profiting too much from other people's suffering at a time like this. So it's, you know, everybody or almost everybody is going to take some kind of a financial hit. But remembering that there's time after, and creativity, ingenuity, being willing to be flexible will make, in the long run, make for more success.
Great.
I think we should leave it there because that's just such a beautiful way to end. You know, remember how you got here. There, it looks like there's some really wonderful suggestions in the chat. Please reach out if you're feeling anxiety about your job or potential job loss. Let's use our network, because we're all in here for each other. I think it's really, really wonderful, this organization that you all have set up with one another in good times and in challenging times.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all for being here, and especially thank you to Dr. Shashank Joshi and Grace Gengoux. Sorry for butchering your last name. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time today, and hope you have a wonderful day. And Christy, do you have any last words?
No, I just want to thank you all for being here. Let's reach out to our network, even if we just need to say hello, just give some words that are needed. I'm here for you. I'm here for everyone. Please reach out to me. It's been a tough few months just because we're all trying to figure out this new normal, but I've taken the time to really recharge my health, my personal relationships, and my network. Just touching base with people, and so. Please, I stress, if you need anything, just reach out to us. We're here for you. And there is one more thing, because I know if you're still on the call, we are giving out. It's your choice if you want a DoorDash or a Amazon gift card. But if you're a member, Tristan, do you want to pick a number between 1 and 50?
I'm going to need to go and join another call. I'm really sorry, but I'm so full of gratitude to all of you, and especially to Dr. Gengoux. Thank you, Grace, for joining us and leading us in this.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. Thank you all. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. 5.
5? Okay, let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sarah Edwards. Are you still on, Sarah?
Not sure.
Not sure. I don't see her. Okay, I'll go to the next one. Is Jill Collins still on? Okay, we're going to go to then Kelly Leonos. You're the next one down. Kelly here?
I think everyone's starting to drop off.
I know. Okay, so the next person down is Jim Lampkin. I saw Jim. Where'd he go? There he is. Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Congrats.
Christy, give it to somebody else. I have plenty. I'm very happy in St. Helena.
You're so sweet, Jim. All right, so then, thanks, Jim. The next one is Janine McCaffrey. I did see you on earlier. Are you there?
Janine, where are you?
Janine.
Hey, Christy, I move we donate it to a nonprofit for Giving Tuesday Now.
Let's do that. Emily, I love that idea because I don't see Janine on here. And you're right, it's Giving Tuesday. I love it.
That's awesome.
Thank you. We will donate that. We will donate that to that. Perfect. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thank
great
you.
Cinco de Mayo. Happy
Thank
Tuesday.
you, Tristan, for moderating.
Yes, thanks,
Good job,
Tristan.
Tristan.
Thank you.